Welcome back to Historical Era. In the past month, a wave of protests and riots has rapidly spread across Southeast Asia, from Bangladesh to Cambodia, and now Indonesia. It's still too early to say whether this is another Arab Spring 2.0. But when looking at Indonesia's situation, multiple issues come to light. Some theories suggest that those behind the riots and arson in Indonesia are not targeting the amended law but are instead pushing for separatist movements against Jakarta's rule. So how is the separatist movement unfolding in Indonesia? And why has it emerged? Let's dive into today's video to find out. A parallel Myanmar. First, let's look at the map of Indonesia. As you can see, this is a vast archipelago, the largest in Southeast Asia by both area and population. Yet since gaining independence, Indonesia has continuously faced separatist movements. Whether under a dictatorship, an elected government, military rule, or civilian governance, even amid the latest riots in Jakarta, separatist influences are evident. Since 1949, when Indonesia gained independence from the Dutch, at least 6 separatist movements have arisen. Unlike Myanmar's civil war, Indonesia has remained stable primarily because the government remains the strongest force. They have waged a decades-long shadow war with various separatist factions and have faced riots demanding secession from Jakarta's rule. Currently, Indonesia is home to several separatist movements: the Aceh Separatist Movement, the Papua Separatist Movement, the Riau Islands Separatist Movement, the North Sulawesi Separatist Movement, and the South Maluku Separatist Movement. The most significant turning point among these movements was the creation of the new state of East Timor. For those wondering why Indonesia hasn't descended into civil war like Myanmar despite its many separatist movements, the answer is that conflict is ongoing but manifests in different forms. The difference is that there has been no outright armed rebellion. The key to Indonesia maintaining control over these regions lies in Jakarta's powerful military. In Aceh, a region infamous not just as a hostile place for the LGBT community but also for its nearly 3-decade-long separatist struggle, a low-intensity war has been fought between Jakarta's forces and local rebels. In 1953, the people of Aceh rebelled after President Sukarno failed to honor his promise to grant them autonomy under Sharia law and merged the province with North Sumatra. Led by Dod Buer Yua, the Aceh rebels waged a 3-year guerrilla war, forcing Sukarno's government to restore the province's original status and grant Islamic self-governance. However, in the 1970s, the separatist struggle reignited over uneven oil revenue distribution between the central government and the local population. In 1976, under the leadership of Muhammad D. Tiro, Aceh once again rose in rebellion. This time, the Indonesian military, better prepared, launched numerous large-scale operations to crush the movement, committing war crimes in the process. What seemed like a straightforward, quick victory took a turn in 1979 when separatist forces were cornered, and Tiro fled to Sweden. However, at this critical juncture, the movement gained support from Libya's leader, Muammar Gaddafi. Thousands of kilometers away, from 1985 onward, the rebellion continued, bolstered by nearly 2,000 Libyan-backed fighters. By 1998, Jakarta had to deploy 50,000 troops with heavy weapons to counter over 5,000 separatists. The conflict remained deadlocked, not because of Indonesia's military might, but due to a devastating tsunami in Aceh in 2003. The disaster claimed 170,000 civilian lives and left 500,000 people homeless. The tsunami struck the separatist stronghold, killing nearly 2,000 fighters and forcing the rebels to negotiate. In 2005, Indonesia withdrew its troops from Aceh, reaffirming the agreements made during Sukarno's presidency and restoring peace. However, this decision would later prove to be a mistake. By 2013, separatist sentiments in Aceh re-emerged as residents demanded to use the separatist flag instead of the Indonesian national flag, sparking new protests. To this day, Indonesia maintains a regular force of 15,000 to 25,000 troops near the province to prevent further unrest. As the flames in Aceh barely cooled, other fires began to blaze. In the Riau Islands, ethnic Malays demanded independence due to discriminatory policies and Jakarta's resettlement strategies, which turned Malays from a majority to a minority. In North Sulawesi, a Christian stronghold, Locals have called for secession in response to Muslim resettlement. In South Maluku, the region is divided between Christian and Muslim factions, with each side engaging in violent clashes. The most intense separatist movement, however, is in Papua, rivaling Aceh in strength. After the Dutch withdrew from Western New Guinea in 1962 and Indonesia took over in 1963, the Free Papua movement launched a low-intensity guerrilla war against the Indonesian government. Targeting military, police, and civilians, separatists have staged protests, raised the Morning Star flag, and called for independence. They accuse the Indonesian military of widespread violence and suppressing their freedom of expression. Indonesia has been accused of conducting a genocidal campaign against indigenous Papuans, with estimates of those killed ranging from 300,000 to potentially over 1 million. Reports also include allegations of Indonesian soldiers committing sexual violence and war crimes against local women. This remains the most volatile separatist hotspot in Indonesia today. When it comes to separatist issues, Indonesia faces challenges comparable to Myanmar, with simmering tensions that could explode at any moment. The key difference is that Indonesia's military remains far stronger than Myanmar's, and as an island nation, it is more insulated from foreign interference. The smoldering flames. To understand why Indonesia faces so many internal fractures, we need to look back at how the country gained independence. While Myanmar struggles mainly with ethnic diversity, Indonesia's challenges are compounded by religious divisions between the nation's two largest religions, Islam and Christianity, which have a long history of conflict. Let's break down these issues one by one. First, there is the issue of ethnicity. In 1945, when Sukarno called on Indonesians to rise against Dutch colonial rule, he enlisted support from many freelancers, including the Acehnese, promising them autonomy under Islamic law once independence was achieved. However, as soon as the Dutch were expelled, Sukarno reneged on his promise. It's worth noting that while 86% of Indonesians are Muslim, Islam is not the official state religion. Indonesia's constitution does not declare Islam as the state religion, distinguishing it from nations like those in the Middle East, Malaysia, or Brunei. From the beginning, Sukarno and Indonesia's leaders aimed to build a secular state, separating religion from government. This helps explain why regions like Aceh push for independence, not just for Islamic ideals but also for ethnic justice. Another hotspot is Papua, where the indigenous population differs significantly from the majority of Indonesians. When the Dutch realized that retaking all of Indonesia was unlikely, they attempted to block Indonesian control of the area. By 1961, a parliament had been elected in Western New Guinea with plans for independence within 9 years. However, Indonesia's military, aware that its ties with the US might limit access to American weapons, turned to the Soviet Union, obtaining everything from infantry rifles to napalm bombs. Evidence suggests Indonesia even used chemical weapons there. Tens of thousands of troops, along with heavy artillery, were deployed. While Papuans were allowed to vote, they faced a grim choice. Independence meant death, while staying meant survival. In the end, only 10-25 people voted, and they chose to remain under Indonesian rule. This election was widely contested, particularly by the Dutch. However, during the Cold War, the US, eager to secure Indonesia's allegiance, pressured the Dutch into accepting the results. But Indonesia's relief was short-lived. On December 1, 1963, Papuans began an armed uprising for independence, marking the start of the Free Papua movement. This conflict has spanned the decades, evolving from guerrilla warfare to extreme violence. Continuing to this day, Indonesia has since shifted tactics, dividing the region into 6 administrative areas and resettling as many Javanese as possible. Since discovering oil and other resources in 2007, the region's instability has only grown. In 2019, the Indonesian president and Jakarta's office declared a state of emergency in Papua due to uncontrolled protests. Since 2021, Indonesian military commanders in Papua have been frequent targets of separatist groups. Currently, 4 separatist groups operate in Papua: the West Papua National Liberation Army, the West Papua Army, the West Papua Revolutionary Army, and the West Papua National Army. Moving on to North Sulawesi and South Maluku. These regions are embroiled in a miniature version of a crusade. The Maluku Islands are sharply divided by religion, with Muslims in the north and Christians in the south. In 1950, South Maluku declared independence, prompting a bloody crackdown by the Indonesian military. This conflict lasted until 1966, with the separatist leaders forced to establish a government in exile in the Netherlands. Since then, Indonesia has maintained about 12,000 regular troops in the area and encouraged Muslim resettlement. What seemed like a shrewd move turned out to be a blunder, as having Islam and Christianity side by side was akin to putting two tigers in one forest. From 1999 to 2002, religious conflicts claimed 5,000 lives and displaced 700,000 people. Tensions persist, with frequent clashes between the two communities. On April 25, 2004, Christians commemorated the failed separatist uprising from 54 years earlier, leading to a skirmish between Christian and Muslim groups that left 10 dead and 90 injured. On September 11, 2011, a rumor spread that a Muslim youth had been killed by a group of Christians, sparking another violent clash that resulted in 3 deaths and over 100 injuries. Looking at these conflicts, Indonesia's situation appears even more complex than Myanmar's. Fortunately, Indonesia's military remains strong, preventing any single group from openly challenging the government's forces. Additionally, as an archipelago, these groups struggle to unite into larger coalitions like those in Myanmar. Recently, there has been speculation that separatist forces are behind the ongoing riots, a claim supported by the fact that the unrest continued even after Jakarta repealed the controversial law. When examining Southeast Asia as a whole, it's clear that most nations are dominated by political dynasties. In Thailand, the Shinawatra family holds sway. In the Philippines, 80% of governors, 67% of vice-governors, 66% of lawmakers, and 53% of city mayors belong to political clans. Cambodia has the Hun Sen family, and since Indonesia's first president, Sukarno, followed by Suharto, political dynasties have remained prevalent. Current Indonesian President Joko Widodo is no exception, with relatives occupying positions such as governor, vice president, and chief justice. Though Sukarno and Suharto were criticized as dictators, their firm policies and iron-fisted rule helped prevent Indonesia from splintering like Myanmar, steering the nation towards development. However, these measures have also bred discontent among many Indonesians. In politics, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And should the riots threaten to overthrow the Indonesian government, as in Bangladesh, it would present separatist groups with a once-in-a-lifetime chance to rise up and demand independence. In conclusion, Indonesia and Myanmar share a similar script but have taken divergent paths. Both struggle with separatism. Both have experienced political dynasties, military regimes, and authoritarian rule, yet one remains in control while the other descends into chaos.